Let's break down Parthenogenesis. When we begin to look at this word, we are going to know that, everyone says that this is the virgin birth. Scientifically speaking, when we begin to look at honeybees, ants, some fish, as well as some dragons, they are known to have the ability to reproduce asexually. This is seen in the time where there's lack of male species and in famine. So when we begin to see like one left or two left, then the nature of asexuality will kick in. What begins to take place is that the woman chromosome on the inside of herself begins to replicate, forming a diploid. And this is where you begin to get the linguistic relation between the DI and the BI, being able to interchange them to mean two. The diploid begins to join together and to replicate, mimicking the two chromosome, forming another female, a clone copy of the mother, and fertilizing the egg. This is more so about the ability to be fertile versus the virginity and the untouched nature of the woman. This is the ability to reproduce alone when a male species is lacking and in the time of war. When we begin to look in the book of Isaiah, the 5th and 6th chapter, the tribes of Judah, Levi, and Simeon were prophesied to go into Babylonian captivity. This was fulfilled in 586 BC. When we begin to focus on Isaiah 6, 7, 8, and 9, this is going to begin to speak about the tribes of Ephraim, the northern kingdom, the lost sheep of the house of Israel, the 10 scattered tribes, were set to go into Assyrian captivity in 722 BC, which was fulfilled as well. In chapters 7 and 14 of Isaiah, we will begin to see the prophecy go forth of, I want to think this is probably about the second or third son, with the epithet of Emmanuel. The name is listed in the 8th chapter. And it's beginning to say that the prophetess or the virgin would bring forth. This word right there is Alma, Alam. This is going to also mean young lady, a maiden. Has nothing to do with perpetual virginity. This is the Hebraic translation of the word Parthenogenesis versus Betula, which begins to focus on the direct virginity of a woman in reference to when Abraham sent Eliezer to find Rebecca. She was a Betula, described as a maiden and a virgin. So when we begin to continue to look at the word Alma, just meaning that she was a young woman that was fertile and able to reproduce, due to the fact that reproduction of the Afro-Asiatic black woman has always been viewed as a blessing, and barrenness was executed under curses. Hence, Yahweh closing up the womb of women and cursing them to perpetual virginity. Versus El Shaddai, who was the breasted one, who began to promise fertility and the replication of nations. When we begin to look at this word young woman or maiden or fertile, Alma in Hebrew, for the young man, it is going to be Elam, Elam. And we know that Elam is going to be one of the sons of, let's go to Genesis 10 so I can make sure I say whose son he is for sure. And so the Elamites are going to be a branch of your ancient Persians. So Elam is the son of Shem. And we know that Shem name means Afro-Asiatic. So when we begin to look at the Elamite rendition of the book of Genesis, this is where you are going to get the Epic of Gilgamesh. So the book of Genesis is not plagiarism. It is literally the writing of these Semitic people groups. When we begin to look at Elam, meaning young man who is of fertility age, it's also important to know that Elam and Alma are linguistically related to Olam, and this means eternity. Olam means a hidden reality, and this is what Yeshua was coming to begin to open our eyes to, the hidden reality where there will be no more weeping, no more gnashing of teeth, where we will be forever Alma and Elam in the new heaven and the new earth. So when we begin to see that the alchemist describes the ethers as a hidden reality, when we begin to look at Parthen, it begins to also denote a level of purity or being untouched or blemished. This is going to correlate Mary, mother of Yeshu, to Miriam in the book of Numbers, the 8th chapter and the 9th chapter, when you see the red heifer being taken without a spot, without a wrinkle, and without a blemish. And then to have juxtaposition between the red heifer and Mary. So being an alma that is untouched, without spot, without wrinkle, without blemish. When we begin to look at the heifer is a young virgin cow. The cow is viewed as sacred in Near Eastern customs because the cow was the one who would continue to feed the nation through famine. This is why when you see the word in English, the Torah, the word the in Hebrew is going to be the hay, as in H-A. That's the definite article. And then your Torah is going to be the Tov and the Resh and the hay. When you begin to just put the Torah together, or you spell out Hathor in Hebrew, you get the Torah. And you get the law. Hathor was the cow goddess in ancient Egypt. The cow goddess was just the representation of the fertility of the nature of El Shaddai. Hathor is the Torah, the law. She is the virgin red heifer without spot, without wrinkle, without blemish. And so when you begin to look at Miriam being the representation, or being called the Alma, the representation of the Alom, the hidden reality. So when we begin to correlate the word pure with Parthen, this is going to lead us back to ether. Ether was viewed as pure air. And so when you begin to think about ether being viewed as pure air, this is going to bring in Kadesh. Kadesh means holy. Kadesh means sacred and sanctified. There's a purity about the Kadesh. And then we know that the Ruach is the wind. It is the air. So when you begin to have the Ruach HaKadesh, or the ether, begin to dwell up on this alma, this is how and what we begin to identify as the virgin birth. And when the pure air, or the ether, began to recognize Yeshu at his baptism, then he was able to be recognized by the demons as Holy One. He was Tahor, which is the reverse root of Torah. He became pure. when we begin to break down the word of, we already did Parthen, then you see Genesis. This is clearly the beginning, the origin. This is Berarit, and with wisdom. And so Genesis in Hebrew is going to be Bereshit. And that's and with wisdom. So in the beginning, with wisdom, Elohim created. Wisdom was always there from the beginning, and we're going to prove this in the Greek as well. When we begin to look at the part, we know that part is a division. It is a fraction of. And then when you begin to look at hen, for the Parthenogenesis, the hen, the HN means one in Greek. We need to understand that the chin in Hebrew is going to lead us to the glory of the Most High. But let's look at this. Hen in Hebrew means grace, favor. Okay? This can also be used as a demonstrative pronoun, meaning behold. When we begin to look at the explanation for the tetranetagram, which is not Yod Hey Wav, is actually Hey Yod, Hey Yod. Okay? And it's behold hand, behold arm, behold hand, behold nail. It also means lo. It means if, and it means they. But you see, it means favor or grace. When it begins to say that when a man finds a wife, he finds a good thing. He finds tov. And in the Garden of Eden, it begins to say that Adam began to find his wife, and that in the heart of man lies no good thing. So Adam did not have the propensity to be good. He had to find a wife in order to obtain the favor to be called good. So the hen begins to represent favor and grace, but it's going to also correlate us to the wife. Let's see the scripture where Yeshua refers to himself as the hen. As the hen brewing. This is going to be Matthew 23 and 27. Was it Matthew 23 and 37? I'm sorry. And so he begins to say, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you. How often have I longed to gather your children together as a hen. This is a metaphor for him gathering the children of Israel together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you are not willing. He was there to regather the lost sheep of the tribe of Israel as the one sent to establish the kingdom, but he knew that they would not allow him to finish the prophecy. But he was the representation of the hen. This is the desire to fulfill the prophecy. And they killed him so that he wouldn't, because they knew who he was. The hen in the Greek is going to be in correlation to the mountain. It's oros, as a bird flying into the air. The root of this word is going to be to rise up, to rear. This word is the mountain. So we know that mountaintop theology is very well known to the Israelite people. So hen begins to derive from the root word chanan, Chanan, which signifies graciousness or kindness. This is also representation of beauty and charm. You can find this being spoken of in Zechariah 6:14, Proverbs 31:30. It is sometimes used in prayers to invoke protection. And this is very important to know because this is going to correlate the hen to the owl and the desire to be hidden under the wings. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Most High, He is my refuge and my fortress. In Him will I trust. Surely shall He deliver thee from the snare of the fowler and from the noise of pestilence. He shall cover thee with His feathers, and under His wing His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. Let's begin to see the hen. The chin, the favor and grace, was used in protection prayers, right? So let's begin to see what the shield and buckler is in the Hebrew. The letter Samek, which is going to be the circular shape, which represents a protective, fortified wall or a safe place, and the concept of something being enclosed. So in the new Garden, in the new heaven and the new earth, it is protected by the hen in the enclosure, which is why we begin to say there are two Genesis, there are two beginnings, there are two Edens. And Hava came to wake up Adam from his asleep state because he was in a garden, a ganin, an enclosure, an imprisonment, and he was in abad, A-B-A-D. You see B-A-D, bad? He was in a slave state. He was in a servant state. So when we begin to look at the Samek, Samek is going to be the shield and buckler. It's a scripture in I think it's Psalms 119. So when you begin to look at the Maggid, I think it is Psalms 119 or Psalms 118. I'll have to come back with a lesson on that. When it begins to correlate the shield and the buckler to the Samek. And so the hen is used for protection. The wife begins to bring favor and protection as the hen. Yeshua wanted to operate as the hen. When we begin to look at Psalms 91, he was the hidden Messiah. He was the Alom Messiah. He was the Nistarat, the terrored Messiah. Tarot. That's rooted in Cather, meaning the hidden one. So when we see the hen, that's the presence of the mother. Let's see. I don't have my other notes. Oh, okay, there we go. No, but the chin, I do have it related to spouse. When we begin to look at the Zug, Z-U-G, this is going to begin to bring us to the zygote, the formation of spouse. Ben Zug, meaning for a male spouse, and Bat Zug for a female spouse. And so when they began to join together, see, I have notes right here. That's the one thing that I do not like. Yeah, I know what I have in my notes. That's the one thing that I do not like at times is when you find stuff a certain way online, and when you do some deep digging and some uncovering, it's not gonna always give you the same search results. And I'm just put that there. So when we begin to look at the one of the words for old woman in Hebrew, is going to be Zakana. And we see that na, the N-A-H, is going to be the same root as the Chena, making them linguistically related. I wish I could show y'all my notes in my other phone. Is it in here though? So when we begin to see that the hen is there, and the hen is favor, and the favor is wife, so on and so forth. The favor is the protection under the wings, right? But when we all, and it means one. So when we begin to look at henotheism is still the worship and the acknowledgement of one, but it's not monotheism. Monotheism is dangerous. When we begin to look at the other word for hen, it's also heis. H-E-I-S, meaning his. So his and her. Huh? It's the oneness, the presence and the ability of the male and female to replicate in parts at the beginning with wisdom in order to reproduce. And this is how wisdom began to immute Yaldabaoth on her own without the permission from the one or from the virgin spirit. Parthenogenesis was here from the very beginning. Asexuality from women has been here from the very beginning. So you have to begin to ask yourself, what was going on in these land masses and these regions for this to even become a theological possibility that parthenogenesis could be in anywhere in relation to a woman being able to do that which is seen amongst the ant, amongst the bee, so on and so forth. There are some that are under the belief that at one time, the earth was just replicas and clones of mothers and of daughters. And because of something that began to take place, then the chromosome that would have formed to create a diploid to duplicate and to clone the mother began to break off as part of itself and began to create the chromosome that would be built out of to create the male species. So when we began to see that this is the belief system, because women have two X chromosomes and the male have one X and one Y, it is the belief that that bottom left chromosome of one of the X's began to break off, creating the part so that the female could exude this X chromosome and impregnate herself with the male species so that we can populate with men and no longer just be replicas of ourselves, so that we can have somebody to work and to till the ground, to name the animals, to provide and protect, while the women were the Azirs, the deliverers, the Nazirs of Egypt, the visors, the wizards, the long-haired Libyan pharaoh warriors, the Dahomey Amazonians, the chieftains of the native Indians who trace their bloodline through the maternal factors, and the fact that the male is the most common predecessor. And we teach that polygamy is to benefit the man, and because he's greedy and because he's wealthy, Jacob worked like the slave for his 2 wives and their 2 handmaidens, and they sold him for mandrakes simply for the usage of his chromosomes to replicate and to duplicate. So the fertility of the woman had nothing to do with her being untouched and unblemished. It had everything to do with the nature of her spirit and the ether around her being untouched and unblemished, so that she could reflect El Shaddai, Hathor, the Torah, the breasted one, who was worshipped on mountaintops